Hey everyone, I'm back. I just did a video on using plaster of Paris, gesso, and lace. And since I had all my stuff out, I thought I would come back and show you how I use the same technique, but with a little bit of a variance. So I'm going to use some commercially made stencils. And then I also have a little collection of ones that I've made and things that I've found that work well for stencils that you can find around your home or at the dollar store or thrifting. And it gives you a really neat organic feel. My main concern with using commercially made stencils, why I love them, I don't want anything like to be really like recognizable in my artwork. So I'm going to show you a way that I kind of get around that when I'm using these with this technique, and how you can kind of make things a little like more mysterious and less like perfect and noticeable of what the print is. So with this technique, so the last one with the lace, I did plaster of Paris and gesso. I'm going to use the same container, and I'm going to use a little bit of a different approach to the plaster and see the difference that we got. I'm going to use the plaster. Oh no, this is joint compound I got at the hardware store, and I'm going to add that into the jar that I just used with the other mix. And this is a lot smoother in consistency. Doesn't have the grittiness. And then I'm gonna add to that the joint compound some matte medium. This helps with the flexibility of your piece. When I've used the joint compound just by itself, I've noticed that I get a lot more flaking and cracking, which can be cool. But I just like the way this goes on a little bit better. Again, I'm doing like half. So I'm doing about half a cup of joint compound, and then I'm going to add about a quarter cup of matte medium to get the consistency I want. And because I didn't clean my jar, I'm going to have a little more lumpiness than you probably will if you do this in a fresh jar. So this is a little bit runnier. You can see it kind of falls off the piece a little bit more. So it's fun to play with. I think you can get a little bit of a thinner application with this. And when you're working with a stencil, since the material of the stencil is thinner, it's nice to have that thinner consistency. Okay, so I'm going to start with some white paper. Again, I just kind of grabbed some different types of papers that I have. And what I want to show you first is how to get variable in your commercially used things, stencils. So I think I'm going to go in with this one, and I'm going to pick two out of here that go together. And these are wonderful tools to have around. They're really fun. You can use them in a lot of different ways. So I think I'm going to go with these two. This is just very random, a texture, almost like a burlap texture. And then these are going to be like a leaf. I like those two together. And then I think I'll do some more floral. So maybe I'll do a floral, and then I'll do this one, which is more just abstracted. So when I'm working with these stencils, I don't want to use the whole thing. I'm not trying to get this whole imprint perfectly on here. So the reason I use 2 is that you're going to get more of a variable. So like maybe I will add my plaster to there and here. So you see I didn't, you know, I left some spots open. So you're going to get, you know, a more delicate looking impression. And then I'm going to go back in with this one and do the same kind of thing. Just pick a small area and add into. And so you see I can kind of go back over that. So I like the way that looks. I'm going to play with that a little bit more. And basically by not using the entire stencil like it is, you're creating the separation of this commercially made by another artist piece. So you want to make it your own. So I'm looking at this, I like it, but I think it needs like a third stencil. So I'm going to go into these areas where maybe that's very prominent. I'm just going to add in a little. And I do want to cover that up a little bit more. So let's see. So I'm going to leave this one like that, and I'm going to go, I know it's a little harder for you guys to see, but I'm going to do the same thing on the white. And I'm just going to move a little quicker this time. I'm going to use the same 3 stencils. And so with this technique, I am going to the edges. On the other ones, I didn't, but on this one, I'm going to go to the edges. So you see, by using the 3 different stencils, you're getting a completely different impression. So even still, like this is pretty prominent. I might go back in with this smaller and just kind of feather that out a little, so it's not so apparent. So I really love those. I'm gonna go ahead and pick let's see, this is a little bit, so this is a very like strong stencil with very apparent florals on it. So for this one, I might take this like half piece, and I'm just going to take that part of the stencil and work it in. So I like that. Let's take this more geometric piece and go over that floral impression. Give it some variance here. Let's see, this one. I'm going to go for the smaller little areas because my piece is small. I have a fly in here. It's fall and they're all coming inside to get away from the cold. My darling. You go away now. So this is really cool. I want to add a little different thing in there though. So let's see. Let me take... So I like just the inside of this flower. I don't want the whole thing. So I'm going to see if I can get that. I'm going to use the other smaller side of this stencil. And it's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect. But I'm looking at these in a different way. I'm looking at these stencils as little pieces and not the whole. And that kind of helps. To use these in more of a unique way. So let's see, I didn't like that. Go back in. Okay, so I'm going to put this one aside. Let's do one more. And this time let's use the stencil. So this stencil was I think I got at Ross. It was a placemat and it just had a lot of really neat organic shapes in it. So I cut it into smaller sections. So that's a really cool stencil. This one I made with hot glue. So those are fun to make and they're very organic. It's hard to get like perfect shapes with hot glue. These I cut out of file folders. And again, random organic shapes. It's a little bit harder to get like the real delicate, for me anyway. It takes a lot, it's very time consuming to cut more of the delicate tiny little pieces. So I tend to use the like commercial ones, to use the little tiny sections, and then I add them into with what I have. But let's do this one. Let's start with the flower. And so that's really pretty. And then I'm going to go in with my little like lines and just add a few of those in there too. So I prefer really to use my own stencils and things that I've made. But definitely, I still have a bunch of like these other things in my stash and I don't want to get rid of them. So I'm trying to figure out ways to incorporate them in my art and make them my own. So that's fun. It's kind of a challenge. So yeah, I really like that too. So I'm going to let these dry and then I'll come back and add some pigment on top of them. I think I'm going to try some watered down acrylic to see what kind of like we can get with that, and we will see how it turns out. Okay, so I am going to do, so with the my last video and the lace, I used a combination of 2 different blues and these spray inks to get this watercolory effect. With these, I'm going to try some acrylics. So I'm going to use Nickel Azul Gold and yeah, these two. And maybe I'm going to go in with a little bit, let's see. Okay, I'm gonna use some of this too. So I'm gonna add a lot of water to these. The fluid ones, that one's dried up, so that one's a no-go. Grab it. So this is like totally random experience here that we're gonna do. See what we could get out of this. We are just experimenting. So I put some of this light orange, and I'm gonna add a bunch of water to it. This is one of my little jelly plates I use a lot. And I'm just gonna, let's see, I'm gonna go into this one. Just start adding quite a bit of water. On one of these big thick brushes too, so the fluid acrylic's definitely moving around better. Go ahead and but you already kind of start to see the plaster coming through. So I would say the acrylics, the pigment's way more rich, so you're gonna just use a lot less. See, I'm gonna use a little bit of this yellow. Since I have it, and I'm being very, very messy, and I'm just gonna dip straight in. But play with your different materials and see how they go together. That's part of mixed media that I love, is just that playfulness, the experimentation, seeing how things work together. So this one I'm going to blot a little bit. I'm just gonna take my rag. I'm gonna pick up some of that extra so I like how this little bit of lighter yellow is going in. So I'm mixing the inks, the spray inks, with the acrylics, and it's really pretty. Okay, let's add a little more water. So another thing that's happening to me is because I used a dirty jelly plate, I'm getting some of my black ink is like coming up, but I like it. So it's giving it like that grungy look. Again, I'm going to blot this one. Okay, I'm going to dry these a little bit. I'm going to take a baby wipe and come in and catch the relief and take off some of the pigment on it so that it shows through a little bit. And if yours still a little bit damp, it'll come off. If you're using acrylics, it's a little bit harder to get off. So this one is a little bright for me. I'm going to go in with some of this darker stuff that got mixed in with the black. Kind of put another coat on. Just to move that around a little. And then same with this one. I really like that like grungy looking effect that I'm getting. So I'm gonna go in again, get rid of some of that brighter. Before this dries completely, I want to try and save some of that relief, that plaster look. So I'm going to blot up what was remaining and then take my baby wipe and just lightly buff the tops of those impressions. And you see you get that to come up a little bit better. So I'm going to push a little bit harder here so you can see that you can really buff down your pigment. And like if there's areas that are like too bright or darker than you want, just really buff that down. So I think these turned out pretty nice. It's different colors than I would usually use, but I like them, and I think in little pieces they will pop really nice. One other thing, if I can find it, I will show you, is just taking like a really fine piece of sandpaper. Let's see if I can find that. So this is a sanding block that I have. You can also just use regular sandpaper. Let's see what this does. So it was dirty, so it's gonna pull up that. It's gonna leave its, I guess it was like graphite or charcoal maybe on that. So doing this will also give you variations in the stencil. So if it's something that was like very apparent that oh yeah, that was a stencil that I used, going back in and taking it down is really neat, and it gives you a completely different look. And it just adds character and story, and that's what we're always trying to get here. And I even don't mind, like, it was a little bit wet and it kind of picked up some of the black ink that I had on here, some charcoal or something. But it's really, really pretty. But this would be a wonderful thing to come back on top of and like paint some flowers, or, you know, take pieces and use them in a collage. But yeah, so that's my technique of using stencils and plaster. And thanks for joining me. Thanks for watching and playing along. We'll see you again soon.